What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Welcome to a Friday show, gang. You made it. End of the week, end of the work week, after 4 o'clock. Punch out. It's happy hour. Hopefully you're out of your job already, you're headed home, or you're out having a drink. It'd be weird to be watching this show like on your phone, listening to it on your headphones, sitting at the bar with a drink. But hey, you do you. I don't know how you watch the show. But welcome to everybody who's here. Cujo's here. Good to see you, buddy. TGIF right back at you. Beyond the rabbit hole, same deal. Let's get that massive cash out tonight. I like that idea. Stephen Leibowitz, Anthony Taylor are here. Good looking slate tonight. We've actually got a full one for the first time all week. 6 games on DraftKings, 8 games on FanDuel. Coming together pretty nicely. A lot of question marks right now, though. A lot of known unknowns. I'm sure we'll get some unknown unknowns thrown in there, too, to mix things up a little bit. But definitely, we stand a strong chance to be playing a completely different slate than the one we're about to talk about. But for what it's worth, we'll talk about what we know. It's always what we're doing. Theodore Parson, what's going on, man? How are you? Welcome. Let's get this where it needs to be. Sims are hot off the presses. As usual, when there's different slates, we've got some blanks up at the top of the board when we sort by DraftKings exposure, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to sort by this, and then we'll filter by FanDuel positioning so that we can make sure we talk about all the late game outliers as usual. But, yeah, real interesting slate. Last night got ugly. The 3-gamer, I hate the small slates. It's difficult, I find, to get enough differentiation in my lineups, like across whatever lineups I enter, where I'm not just kind of riding on a set of players across so many of them on such small slates. Because the sim results, like if you're not playing like the full 150, then if you're dealing with the top, you're going to get a lot of commonality across those lineups. And that's what I ran into a little bit last night. I was right where I wanted to be because I was super heavy on Celtics. And what we ran into last night was just like the perfect downside situation for the Celtics. They got away out by 20 some odd points in kind of a blowout. They emptied the bench, and basically all the top guys played fewer minutes than expected. Or, even in a reasonable game where they're up 12, 15, you could expect a few more minutes. It was, once it cracked a little bit further beyond, it got out of hand a little bit there for the Celts, and you could see it in the results. I was watching my results. I was out doing a couple quick errands, watching my results, doing great. I put it in the Discord. It all seemed to be going so well. A quote from Sin City. Doing great, and then those guys sat, and it was just downhill. What are you going to do? Them's the breaks. But we got a really good-looking one tonight. Let's talk about some Vegas. Hopefully some people did well out there. Everything we talked about came through pretty much on that slate, outside of the Celtics falling short, but having that as the biggest piece was not ideal. What the hell was that? All kinds of craziness still going on in Jersey, so something just went by in the periphery out the window there. I was like, ooh, it's a drone. It's not. For one thing, I'm at street level, not even. Technically, I'm like looking out, like at my eye level is where the street is. So, wasn't a drone. But anyway, something caught my eye. Anyway, let's talk Vegas. Ready for the weekend craziness. Javier's here. First time I catch the show from the start. Good to see you, buddy. Welcome. Yeah, weekend, just 2 games tomorrow. I mentioned it on this week's shows already, but just to reiterate for anybody who hasn't caught us this week, tomorrow, if you're using the projections, just be aware I'm going to post the projections in the day. I will do my best to get them updated to the last point at which I possibly can, but I'm going to my niece's Nutcracker performance tomorrow evening. So I think we'll probably be fine. Again, it's 2 games. It's an NBA Cup day, so we're probably going to have a pretty good idea of what's there. And any ins and outs, I'll include notes for like, if this happens, do this for any known unknowns for tomorrow. But you guys, I'm pretty sure you'll be okay. That'll be that. And I mentioned maybe a little bit at the end of Christmas Day, might get a little bit tied up, but otherwise we are going to be on top of things. Those will be like the only 2 days throughout the basketball season that I can foresee being tied up. Could be Travis is here. Good to see you, pal. On the way to the Cactus Club to listen to the show while I have a beer. Love it. Has the Prime Minister of Canada at my work for a ship launch? So we got off early. Wow, that's fun. You guys wear the what are the things they wear? They have like what is it? A little red flower. Now I gotta look it up. Damn it! Don't do these things to me. There's a poppy on Remembrance Day, so I guess it's not an everyday thing. That's what I was thinking of. The red poppy is a flower that Canadians wear to commemorate those who died in battle and show their support for service and sacrifice of the armed forces, veterans, and their families. Oh, they do. All right, they do wear it at other events, anniversaries of significant battles, funerals, memorial services, etc., etc. All right. Anyway, probably not at the opening of a port. Anyway, let's talk basketball. Let's talk Vegas. I was just pulling the board up. Washington Wizards at the Cavs. Cavs are favored by 17 in kind of a wipeout. That is one of the games with a pretty big question mark in it, though. I'm hoping this news doesn't come crashing down on us 7 minutes from now when the 4:30 comes out. Let's hope that it just kind of stays out there for 5:30 so that we're not just playing guessing games with bad data throughout the show. But we'll deal with it when we get there. But the big question mark with the Cavs, Evan Mobley, is questionable. So the line will stay up. It'll still be a potential wipeout on their side, but obviously some value will shift in Cleveland if that happens. Otherwise, kind of looks like an are who they are situation. Nobody really excelling. On the Wizards side, some mix and match pieces, and then major piece of value in Champagny, who is got to be around here somewhere. That's right. He's going to be down here. There he is, because he's on the DraftKings slate. He's 82% exposed on DK, just 14% on FanDuel, 5,400 over there, but a giant piece on the DraftKings slate, 6+ value score. You've also got Micic at a 618 for 5,100. So you've got two rock solid value options right there that are 30+ minutes, decent per minute performers. So just really interesting. And Champagny out of that first game, noteworthy value for the slate. Pacers at the Sixers. Sixers favored by 6.5. Everybody is basically back except Caleb Martin's out, but they'll have Embiid, they'll have Paul George, they'll have Tyrese Maxey. So, basically the full complement of players. We'll see what they've got. We'll see what Embiid's got to offer us, but several very big star centers on this slate, and Embiid's definitely in the mix. 228.5 point total there. And again, Sixers favored by 6.5 in a home game. The Lakers are without LeBron James, which is just going to create a bunch of value, and then just a ton of upside for AD, obviously. T-Wolves favored by 8.5 over the Lakers in a home game in Minnesota. Just a 213.5 point total in that one, though. First two games far more appealing as far as the game total goes, but the situational environment for the Lakers is definitely going to thrust some AD into our lives, and it's going to probably get some odds and ends around the D-Los and the Ruiz of the world. The T-Wolves side of things, I'll take whatever ant we get. I'm not sure that we'll get much Julius Randle or anybody like that thrust into our lives. You guys are looking at it right now. I'm not, so we'll see. But probably just a are who they are spot where the T-Wolves just kind of handle their business as strong but not overwhelming favorites in a low total game. The Hornets and the Bulls playing a 234-point total. Ongoing injury situations with Charlotte. No LaMelo still. They're potentially getting Miles Bridges. He's questionable for today. That could create additional value. Tijani Salon is questionable today. On the other side, Giddey and Vooch and Patty Williams are all questionable. So there's just a lot of moving parts in that game that's already kind of wide open. Chicago's favored by 6.5 in a home game, but a juicy total at 234 and a lot of different directions to go there. So Brandon Miller's looking really strong. Several of the pieces from the Bulls could get moved up if some of those guys don't play. That's a spot to watch the news for like crazy emerging value. But right now, more of an are who they are spot for the Bulls. Nets and the Grizzlies. Grizzlies favored by 10 at home. This is like the healthiest the Grizzlies have been in years. There's only like 2 or 3 relevant guys on the injury report today. But everybody just plays like mid-20s style minutes. It's kind of difficult to project without just kind of looking silly, but it's what they're doing. So I don't love it. Net side, we'll see what comes from that. Grizzlies favored by 10, 228.5 point total. Just kind of one of the games that falls into the middle of the board. We'll take what we get from it. but I don't know how much prioritization we'll have for it. As I'm saying that, let me make sure I'm looking at the injuries. There's a lot of them. Just making sure I'm tracking that accurately. Yeah. Either way, the numbers will tell us what's popping up on my phone. That's not basketball. Jalen Waddle is healthy. I'm going to give the football projections. They're up on the site. They went up at like 5 o'clock this morning. I'm going to give them an update after the basketball slate locks, and then I'll be working on the groups article online tonight into tomorrow. Going to have as much of that posted for tomorrow as possible because I'm not going to have a ton of time overnight on Saturday like usual to write 25,000 words. Yeah, that's exaggerating. 20,000. It's a lot. The Clippers, the Nuggets. Nuggets favored by 6. 227-point total there. Another spot with a very, very big question mark. Jamal Murray is questionable to play. That obviously would throw Russ into our lives. So definitely another key injury spot to watch. Clippers at the top end. Maybe we'll see some Harden come through. Jokic is going to be a massive piece either way. Obviously one of the big star centers on the slate and a very expensive but very appealing piece to reach for. It's not a bad game environment there. They're getting Aaron Gordon is probable, so they're most likely getting Gordon back in the mix. Phoenix and Utah. Phoenix favored by 7 against a pretty bad Utah team. 234-point total there. We've got KD is probable in that one. And Nurk on here? I would have sworn he was. Hang on. Double checking this. As usual, if you're looking for injury news. Oh, no, he's not on the injury report. Okay. Misremembering. I must have been confusing him with Vooch. Vooch is questionable. So Nurk, healthy, but coming back to potentially limited minutes. So we'll see what that looks like. I'm not really sure if we should expect a full-blown upside game from him, but definitely pieces and parts from a Phoenix team that's favored in a pretty strongly total game at the end of the night for the FanDuel slate. So any Booker you get to, if you get to some KD, perfectly fine. San Antonio and Portland to end the night. Another one with a ton of news to wait on. 225-point total. The Spurs are favored by 3.5 on the road. We've got all of DeAndre Ayton, Donovan Clingan, and Time Lord on the questionable list. So keep an eye on the center spot out west at the end of the night on FanDuel. Could get interesting. Depending on who's available, the other guys will look good. If all 3 guys are out, I have no idea what the hell they'll do. But presumably they'll get at least one of those 2 guys, probably 2 of them. And that's it. So let's dive in. Let me read off the full list of stuff here. So our probables, and we're right at 4:30, so we'll see how this changes in the next couple minutes. But our probables, Isaac Okoro, Seth Curry, Lonzo Ball, Zach LaVine, Anthony Davis, Austin Reeves, Aaron Gordon, Kevin Durant, Jordan Clarkson, Lauri Markkanen, and Colin Sexton, who's been declared available already. Questionables, Evan Mobley, big one. Miles Bridges, big one. Tajani Salon, a little bit less so. Josh Giddey, Vooch, Patty Williams, all important. Any one of them comes off the board, it does change the scenario for the rest of the team there. So those are definitely important ones to watch. Jamal Murray, monster piece. Then DeAndre Ayton, Donovan Clingan, and Time Lord. And then our known outs, Isaiah Jackson, Aaron Nesmith, Ben Shepherd, James Wiseman, Caleb Martin, Sadiq Bey, Malcolm Brogdon, Keyshawn George, Corey Kispert, Kyle Kuzma. That's where a lot of Washington comes from. Max Strus, still out. Bojan Bogdanovic, Cam Thomas, Zaire Williams, Youngji Kui. I'm pretty sure it might be the other way around. They always do it with the a lot of Asian cultures put the last name first and the first name last. And then I never know when Western reports put it with a comma, which way it's supposed to go if I'm not familiar. Somebody let me know if you know that guy's actual name. I think that's how you say it, though. Either way, Zach Edey's doubtful. Probably not going to play. Gigi Jackson, Vince Williams Jr. are both out, but everybody else back from Memphis, basically. LaMelo's out. Trey Mann is out. Grant Williams still out. Jackson Hayes, Jalen Uchafino, Bronny James, LeBron James, Jared Vanderbilt, Christian Wood continue to be out. Joe Ingles still out. Derek Jones Jr., Kawhi Leonard, Terrence Mann, PJ Tucker all out for the Clips. Vlaco Concar, Dario Saric, Taylor Hendricks continue to be out. Svi is still out. Cody Williams, Zach Collins, Keldon Johnson, Trey Jones, Stephon Castle are out, which creates some value for San Antonio that I forgot to talk about, but we'll get to. Thibault and Dwap Reith are both out. Dwap Reith is technically doubtful in amongst all the other centers who are questionable. Diving into some numbers. As I'm saying that, the one piece of news that we got for the 4:30 report is apparently Dwap Reith upgraded to questionable now. So all 4 of the potential centers. I'm just going to move them. So all those guys are now currently questionable. We'll see what else comes out. A bit upgraded. Hit the like button if you like the show. Subscribe. Check out rotoscouts.com. Access to all of these NBA projections along with NHL projections for the Monsters single game slate tonight. It's, I've already forgotten. It's Ottawa against somebody. Projections for that one are live on the site if you happen to be playing the tiny NHL slate. And the football slate is projected. As mentioned, I'll be updating that tonight. I'll get the rankings updated. It's Ottawa, Carolina, by the way. I'll get the rankings updated either tonight or in the morning tomorrow before I head out for football. I only like to do the rankings a couple of times, so like if you're desperate for the most current information, if you're using their football projections, it's always going to be the projections. They're all time-stamped, so you'll see where the differences are, and it's very easy to figure out what the movement will be like. But I'll get all that stuff updated overnight again tonight, and we'll be current going into Sunday, so you get access to that. NHL, NBA, every main slate, every NFL showdown game, all for under $1 a day. All in. MLB when that's back too. A lot going on in MLB. Yanks acquired Devin Williams. Kyle Tucker got traded to the Cubs. Big day. Did the Bulls call up Sanogo? That's a interesting note. Yeah, so if we see Vooch out, obviously that's going to create a pretty massive value shift in Chicago. I'm just going to go into the other file real quick and give Sanogo a highlight so that I remember that he's there. Just in case. The guy really to watch there, 3,500 on DraftKings and 4,100 on FanDuel, is Jalen Smith in that situation. I think he would become a massive piece of value, and then Sanogo would just pick up the backup minutes. But yeah, if he's up with the big club, that is definitely interesting toward that news. Yeah, Steven, Kyle Tucker traded to the Cubbies. Yanks apparently refused to include Luis Hill. If you forgive me a stupid pun, that's a bad hill to die on. I texted that to my friends. I didn't get a laugh there either. Don't worry about it. It's a bad pun, like I said. But it's a terrible decision. I get that he was good. I get that he won the Rookie of the Year as one of the worst Rookie of the Years of all time. But it's bad walk rate. It's flash in the pan, more likely than not, in my opinion. Not a big fan, but we'll see. Hopefully something comes of it. I was talking with Woody in the chat in the baseball channel. Presumably, we'll see the Cody Bellinger to the Yankees come to fruition now. So we'll deal with that when we get there. Let's dive into some basketball. What do you guys say? Guards. Look at the guard spot. We have a massive share of Chris Paul on FanDuel. Don't be deceived by that down arrow. He's just the most popular guard on the FanDuel slate right now. So his ownership went through, I think, in the 60s somewhere. And we got him a little bit lighter than the field here. But I think that's a reasonable enough play, given the Paul's very likely to play 30-plus minutes with a lot of missing pieces for San Antonio. And it remains Chris Paul. He's been producing at a pretty solid clip. 1.07 per minute this season, 1.08 on DraftKings, where you'd be playing him on the 2-game slate later on that I don't have pricing in here for. As usual, once the last of the 6 games on DraftKings are locked, I'll go in and I'll add the pricing and projections for that DK late slate. I just don't like to confuse the issue for people who are playing the DK main slate by putting them both in one spot. And I don't have the bandwidth to create two different spots right now. The Spurs are most likely going to do Spurs things, Theodore Parson, but I do like Vassell. He's right here. 26% and a little bit below the field on him as well. I've got him at 30 minutes, though. He played 28-2 the last time out, but to your point, no Castle, a lot of missing bodies. I could easily see him playing an additional 1.8 minutes and getting to the 30. That's where I put him. I've seen him with 32. I've seen him lower at 28. I originally had him at 28, and then, I just kind of kicking things around. I moved him up. I can see the upside. I can definitely see the downside as well, though. If you get like 26, 28 minutes, comes with a pretty strong downside. But he is a decent performer at 1.08 overall per minute. Another guy we got a lot of on the FanDuel slate. 26% of him at the shooting guard position, 45% of Chris Paul. Just 7% of Bradley Beal, just 8% of Tyus Jones, 2% of Keontae George, but then we go back up to the field with 21% of Shaedon Sharpe, 20% of Julian Champagnie, the other Champagnie. Remember, we've got multiple Champagnies. Oh, he's sorted at the forward. That's right. So you'll probably see on FanDuel some double Champagnie lineups, but the other one was more like this kind of exposed on FanDuel versus the 80-something% that he is on DraftKings, Justin, because of the price difference. But you'll probably see some of both. Colin Sexton, mix and match level, kind of an is who he is spot for Sexton right now, but if they lose a couple other pieces, then it becomes more interesting. Again, Sexton is available. Markkanen's probable. Clarkson is probable. You could see a little bit of shift there. But just looking like a mix and match piece. Those are the only outliers. Massive share of Micic on FanDuel. 5,800 over there. Both guard spots. 50% share. Above the field. 75% and closer to the field on DraftKings, where he's just 5,100. Looks like a very strong piece on FanDuel. Looks like an outrageously good piece on DraftKings. On a large enough slate, it's not a 3-gamer. If you want to take this down somewhat to spend shares on other guys, you can. But that right now is looking like a very strong piece. And I know he's failed us a couple times already. I know he's got a 46.6% true shooting rate. 29.4% assist rate is nice. Obviously, we're looking for some facilitation out of him. 34.3 minutes the other day. He put up a 34.9 on FanDuel. If he does that for your money today, you're not shot in the foot at worst. We'd like a little bit more, but I mean, that's right on a point per game. That's an upside performance from him, and we will absolutely take that at these prices. Much more so on DraftKings. That's an uncomfortable amount of KPJ on the DK slate, 4,200 over there. I was thinking we'd see more Harden. It was actually similar share, 32.6% of Harden at the top, 9,700, point guard only. That's a lot of KPJ, though. 1.0 per minute for just 4,200. Totally worthwhile. He put up 35 in 37.4 minutes the other day. Got him at 24 minutes right now. Not an outrageous uptick. Thomas Bryant going to the Pacers. Interesting. They're obviously running short on big men. Hopefully that doesn't mean bad things for his Achilles. What's up, Zevon? Or Zevon? Not sure which way that goes. Surprised Paul is getting way more ownership than Simons, says Theodore Parsons. I don't know, for Portland, like with basically all the guards and everybody in play, I think it just kind of, you get mix and match shares of everybody. Where Portland, what I'm keeping an eye on right now is the bigs. Simon's a 0.88 per minute guy. Got him at 30, but for 6,400, the way that bounces off of salary, minutes, and rate, Paul's just giving you better across the board. He's only 100 more expensive. He doesn't have the positional flex. But, you could even out the minutes, and Paul would still look better for your money. He's a 1.07 per minute player. They were closer last year for sure. Reason to argue that. Simon's obviously the higher usage guy, but Chris Paul's got by far the more dominant assist rate and does Chris Paul things. I wouldn't begrudge you any Simon shares, though. I mean, he's a reasonable mix and match option from that late game, and at 6,400, that gives you flex. So if you sink some of these shares from here into here, presumably in a lot of lineups, you'll have another position or you'll have $100 to move back and forth if need be. So he's a fine person to keep in mind in just like an is who he is spot. Speaking of is who he is on FanDuel, Nembhard, 28 minutes for 4,700 of him for 0.78 per minute is not the most appealing thing in the world. 12.6% and below the field. This is where I'd rather be. I'm never excited to get beyond the field on Andrew Nembhard. It happens from time to time because he's typically cheap. If we saw him at like the DraftKings 4,300, which I'm getting to in a sec, we would have a lot more on FanDuel. I'd much rather be in the FanDuel position where I think he's a little overpriced for his production. 0.78 per minute on DraftKings, both guard spots for 4,300. Totally different story. We're level with the field in a third of all lineups across our top 150. I think he's at worst a movable value part on the FanDuel on the DraftKings slate. Compares favorably with like KPJ right here. Some of these guys down here. Chris Dunn in just 23 minutes. Probably not the strongest comp, but you save a couple $100. We got to a little bit of him, but I think you'd rather go to Nembhard there, as uncomfortable as that might be. 0.78 per minute, not ideal. Does have a decent assist rate, 24.5% assist rate. Put up just 18.3 on the FanDuel scale in 30.7 minutes the other day. And very, very capable of giving you the kind of downside. Oh, I didn't realize I had accidentally... That's why that looks funky. These columns are... This is a last three and a last three that I no longer update because they're just make the screen too wide. Apologies if the screen didn't look good for you guys. Why is it not letting me hide these? I guess I got to do it one at a time. So Harden I touched on just briefly, but we're above the field on him on FanDuel. 9,600 over there, 28%. He's been very solid. I like that spot for him. I can see pure upside for James Harden, but James tends to have downside games a lot. And it seems like a lot of games where it's just kind of up to him, whether he's actually pressing the accelerator all the way down or he's just kind of coasting. So we play James when he looks good. We hope for the upside. 227.5 point total the last time I looked. Reasonably solid game environment. And just continuing to drive the car. So I think we're there on FanDuel and I think we're there on DraftKings. The field is there more on DraftKings at 32%. And he's 9,700 over on DK. But I think he makes sense. Model really pushed him up today, so. James versus Westbrook. Yeah, for whatever we get of normal run for Westbrook, and then if Murray doesn't go, then we get an uptick for Russ. And it becomes even more interesting. Maybe they'll get into an actual fight. Desmond Bane, John Morant. Again, the Grizz kind of hole now. But just low 30s minutes for these guys. For guys that are star caliber players. Or Ja anyway. And Bane, a very good player. They don't really pull a ton of minutes even for their upside guys. And then it gets thinner and thinner as you go down the bench. So I don't really love the pieces for Memphis, but I could see anybody from the upside, from the top end of it succeeding. There's no way I'm going to rule Ja out. And on DraftKings, he's looking like a piece. That's why we're seeing him up at the top of the board here. FanDuel, 9% of Desmond Bane, just 1% of Ja. We're level with the field on Bane. You could go up. You could go down on that one. That's a pause. You could go up. You could take less of that one and be perfectly fine in either direction. At 6,900, oh man, 6,900 too. 6,900, both shooting guard and small forward eligible. He's a good enough player, but it's not the same value that it is on DraftKings for 67 shooting guard, small forward. He's 26% owned over there, level with the field in our top 150. I think that's perfectly fine. It is a position you can adjust in either direction. So is Ja. Ja's only 87 on DraftKings. He's only 88 on FanDuel, but it's just bumping against other point guard ownership, notably Chris Paul at point, and we're distributing that money elsewhere, is my suspicion. But if Ja goes out and plays a few additional minutes, I mean, he doesn't need all that many minutes at all at 1.42 on FanDuel, 1.47 on DraftKings to just put up a monster anyway. So you can always get some Ja, but he looks a lot better and a lot more appealing on the shorter DraftKings slate. I've got I don't know if it's dangling off my hat. Got like a pet hair tickling my eyelashes every time I move my head. It's just constant cat hair, dog hair all over this joint. I've got these. Must be in the other room. I've got those roller things just everywhere. Dante DiVincenzo, kind of looking like a piece on DraftKings. He's only 3,900. It's just so difficult to trust what the minutes look like, what the performances look like this year. He's just a completely different guy out in Minnesota than he was last year in New York. He was such a good piece in New York throughout last season. And in an NBA sense, but also in just a DFS sense. He's gone from 0.96 last year on 20.9% usage as a big piece for New York to 0.81 on 17.5% usage, and he's lost minutes. He's unhappy. They're unhappy with him. It's not a good situation. But you're getting Dante DiVincenzo's upside for 3,900 on DraftKings now. Point guard and shooting guard eligible. That gives him nice flexibility. We're still shooting 32% from three, 6.6 attempts a game. We should put the career numbers in here. It would just make life easier. The point that I'm about to make, as I've made before about Devo, is the day that you get 3 of those additional threes that he's been missing to fall for such a sub $4,000 price is going to be ridiculous value. So you just keep going to it at this point on DraftKings, not as a crazy asset for the slate, not as a top priority guy, but as a very solid value mixer. I think it's there for 3,900. I really do. He's only projected at 20 and change, but he's a 5.37 value score. We're looking for 5.5, but we don't have a ton of 5+ even options on DraftKings among guards. So at worst, somebody to keep in mind. Field's there, though. Field's going to be in the 20s. So a little bit below. On FanDuel, we didn't get him at all. He's 4,500 and kind of irrelevant to the slate on FanDuel. Just totally differently shaped with these 2 extra games. Norm Powell's an interesting one. We came up short on Norm. 6,700, I kind of get it on FanDuel. He's been good this year when he's played. 18 games, 32.6 a night. In 34.9 the other day, put up a 31.8 on FanDuel. That's not quite his point per minute that he's been averaging for the season. But the thing to watch is the downside, right? On 19% usage, slightly above average usage last year, we're talking about a guy who was a 0.77 per minute player overall. And he's been asked to do more this year. 26.7% usage. He's putting up, there's a reason that's gone from 0.77 to 1, but you could also see this just going back down. This might be the peak, or it might have peaked prior to this, and we might be headed back down toward, 0.9 would be reasonable. So if you catch that wave of downside games from Powell, it could be damaging at these prices. 67 is not exactly a discount, so I get this. On DraftKings for 63, I was actually expecting to see a little bit more of them. 13%, that's pretty hard undercut to the field. This is your late game on DK too. Field's essentially double that. So if you want to claw back some shares of Norm Powell, that's a reasonable pivot from, say, some of these $6,700 Banes. Less so from anybody up here because they're either spend-ups or value guys that are kind of critical. But you could also draw shares from, this kind of territory, too. There are scraps of shares down there. I wouldn't call you crazy for leveling off Norm Powell a little bit more with the field here. But the sim really not getting there. It's a sub 5 value score when we really want 5.5. Just kind of a shorter slate on DK. So it's one of the spots of potential movement. But it's also one of the spots where our sim is taking a strong position. Brandon Miller looking like a monster piece on FanDuel for 8,100. Shooting guard, small forward eligible. We've got him 68% of the time. That's gobbling up a lot of the other guys' ownership and getting a huge share. Be interesting to see how much goes at small forward with, what do we got? Yeah, it's actually reasonable because these guys are all multi-position too. FanDuel's giving multi-position to just everybody now. Just 8% on DraftKings. He's 9,000 on DraftKings. There's your reason. This is a gigantic price difference. 5+ value score, 5.3 when we're looking for 5 on the nose on FanDuel. That is huge. He's sub 5 when we need 5.5 on DraftKings. We still got some because he's such a good raw potential score play. So for 9,000, his price doesn't necessarily fall off the board as far as how it mass out. But with the field getting there a little bit aggressively for the money, we're coming up a little bit light. Field's probably in the around double that range, I would guess. Interesting site-to-site difference. The field's in the less than 3x, but more than 2x territory. So if you want to take this up to like 12, grab a few more shares of a, again, just raw upside guy. Could go out there and put 50 points on this slate with ease. That's a 1 standard deviation game for him today. Dunn not coming up at all on FanDuel. Mix and match piece on your DraftKings slate, 6%. Just 4,000. Just a cheap guy with the idea of some minutes. 0.84 per minute on DraftKings, 0.87 on FanDuel this season. Was a 0.94 per minute player last year. Playing about 22 and change a night. It's right where we've got him tonight. Not a huge priority, but a movable piece for a fair price and a guy who could potentially, again, rotate into some of these shares if you're looking to get under the field and take a position. And the way to do that, in my opinion, would be choose which one of these guys you're going to take that position on and then take the shares out of the other guy. Don't move them both down against the field, right? Choose one to be like, take, if you're going to have, let's say, the ownership on Andrew Nembhard, you're taking 15 points out of it, put 7.5 points into your KPJ shares, and then put your other 7.5 points into, whoever you're taking from down here, be it Chris Dunn, be it Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's another movable part for a cheap price, $3,900 Devo, who we just talked about, who is actually probably the most appealing out of those guys, given what we know he's capable of doing. So that's how I would try and build a position on one of these guys, rather than just saying, I'm going to cut them both in half or cut both by a quarter, just be a little bit further below the field on both, and then get a little bit more of these guys where you're just leveling these guys. Then you just end up basically even on everybody, and you've got no position. Hopefully that makes sense. Donovan Mitchell right now just looking like what he is, but there will be a potential void of usage if Mobley doesn't play. So we could see a little bit of an uptick for each of the starting Cavs. It won't be dramatic, but right now we're getting 4% of them. Probably level us back to the field, maybe claws back like a 1.5 or 2 in a fantasy score sense. On DraftKings, 6%, a little bit of more of an undercut to the field, but that probably puts the field in the 10% range. It's easy enough if you want $8,900 Donovan Mitchell in your life, especially if the situation changes. It's easy enough to envision a path to grabbing more and maybe getting them level with the field or building a position. Yeah, 8 game, there just has not been enough time. I've been trying to get back on the board for NFL shows. With the showdown slates, it just conflicts with keeping up with post-lock NBA stuff and like going into lock NBA stuff. And I chose to be on top of the NBA projections rather than doing an NFL show, because that's what people are paying for, right? So I got to be on top of that. But the main slate has just gotten away from me the last couple of weekends just with the time constraints of like putting everything together and then staying on top of the other sports. But It wasn't my goal, but that's what's happened over the last couple. Hopefully for the last, maybe for the last couple of weeks, we'll get back on the board, but it's definitely not going to happen tomorrow because I'm going to be out for the evening tomorrow. So, but I appreciate you asking, and I do miss doing them. They were fun. I like doing the big marathons, and I like doing the showdown with the lineup building. Those are good shows. What's up, Doug? How you doing, bud? Confidence percentage in Micic as like a no numbers Theodore? Moderate. I've been burnt by that one before, so I won't say overwhelming. But what's in his favor overwhelmingly are the numbers. Again, we're getting a absolute ton of Micic here and even more over here. He's just correctly priced for the upside for a guy who's playing 32 minutes a night. Played 34 the other day. Again, put up 34.9. So he's got upside beyond the 0.76 if you catch him on the right day. Yeah, as a chalk piece. That's what I'm saying. Confidence in the guy, not so much. And again, have been burnt by him before. That is not something that should keep you away from a good mathematical play. Right? Just because, and honestly, those are the guys that are more appealing in that role because the public won't get there as much as they should. And we can see that clearly in our sims. The public will be scared of Micic because of his underperformances. They should be more focused on just the value that he's already putting on the board. The fact that they're going up against a pushover Chicago team with a good total. That is what, the second highest total? Tied for second highest. 232, and this may have shifted a little bit. 232 between the Cavs and the Wiz is the top. Then that game, 231.5 between the Hornets and the Bulls. And then also 231.5 for the Phoenix-Utah game on the FanDuel slate. So this is your second highest total flat out on DK. But yeah, the roller coaster guys become more appealing in tournaments because the public, even when they're good chalk, won't get there quite as much. And all the sites will be telling people to go there, and they'll be correct, and succeed or fail for him after lock. As always, that's why they play the games, right? Matters less than being in the correct position ahead of lock. And people will fall on a guy like that, where like. Who's a more reliable guy, heavy air quotes on that, like James Harden will be probably like, maybe their ownership projections that I used here are not quite right about it, but the field will be at a very appropriate level of $9,700, mostly reliable James Harden. It's not the greatest example in the world either, though. But just the plays with faith or the guys who consistently hover, in and around their just, standard performances more often than not and are perceived as less roller coasters. Those are the guys that get owned correctly. The roller coasters are the guys who become interesting in tournaments because they're the guys that the public won't be quite as caught up on. And they're the guys that spike big upside performances when you catch them right. Let's see. We talked about Mitchell. Jordan Poole, mix and match at worst in, again, a pretty appealing game environment. 12% of them on FanDuel. That's fine. 7,000 both guard spots over there. 73 gets a little expensive on DraftKings. Falls short of a 5 value score when we want 5.5. He's also sub 5 on FanDuel, but that's a lot closer to the mark on the FanDuel slate. But if I came up lighter on Jordan Poole, I wouldn't be really upset about it going up against that Cleveland team. Giddey, Conley, mix and match shares below the field on both sites. Paul George, again, with everybody basically in place for Philly today, doesn't look really appealing at all on FanDuel for the 84. For 8,000 on DraftKings, we got a little. But even with a strong projection, I mean, it's not a bad projection for your 8,000, but it's still only 4.6 value. So I guess it is a bad projection for your 8,000. McConnell did come up 8.6% on FanDuel. Lighter than the field on the DraftKings slate at 4%. He's only 5,200 there. That's, at worst, always one to watch. just because of his per minute output. TJ McConnell 1.30 last year, down to 1.20 this year, 1.17 on DraftKings. But when you get that kind of production for the money, that is not a terrible option. And honestly, if you're considering, obviously the minutes are very different. It's a 9-minute projection difference, so this is not a direct comp necessarily. But the 1.17 that McConnell can give you for 52 versus the 0.81 that an unreliable guy like Micic, just to pull that thread, for 51 gives you all the way at the top with massive ownership. It's at least a reasonable, guy to keep in mind if your goal is to pivot out of some of those Micic shares. But typically we want McConnell when he steps into more minutes. That said, 52.2 FanDuel points in 25.8 minutes. That's 2 per minute to ram the point home, and that's in his last game. So TJ's always capable of that. Koulibaly mix and match play across sites. Don't really need that much of them. And a little bit of an undercut to the field, but 10% of them in your lineups. That's a player you can always take more of. Any of those star caliber guys, if you're liking it, grab a little bit more. Right now, projections numbers not quite adding up. He's a sub 5 value score, sub 5 on DK. But guys like this, more than capable of blasting through the roof on that value, on that rate, on that projection. Not a lot of D-Lo is interesting. I was definitely expecting more. We do have much more Austin Reeves on the FanDuel slate at 19%. We didn't really get much of either of them on the DraftKings slate. 0.92 per minute FanDuel, 0.96 DraftKings for D-Lo. Should have an easy path to 30-plus minutes. I've got him right at 30 on the nose. Maybe I owe him a couple minutes. Did go out and put up a 56 in just under 34 minutes in his last game. I guess I missed that one. What slate was that on? I don't remember that game. Either way, warm bodies for the Lakers right now, in addition to AD, is just kind of the theme here. So if you get a little bit more D-Lo than that, that's fine. I wouldn't go crazy with it at 6,200 on FanDuel, 61 on DraftKings, 2.67% exposed below the field over there, sub 5 value score. If you see him spike a couple additional minutes, he will get incrementally better, obviously. But he's a low-end overall performer. He's not as good as he should be. Reeves at 0.88 for 5,800, I think, is the better buy. You're getting him at different positions on FanDuel. They share point guard on the guard spot on DraftKings, but didn't really come up. His 6,300, different price point on DK, 4.5 value score versus a 4.7. And again, that's a full point below where it's within range of our FanDuel. Bub Carrington coming up a little bit. I don't love that. I just don't like throwing these guys into Cleveland. 4,900 though, that is very cheap. That's where some of our other point guard shares disappeared to on FanDuel. There's just value there. 0.77 per minute overall. Just so many missing guys in Washington floating value for this team right now that it's believable. But a low-end per minute guy, even in an abundance of minutes going up against a good defensive team, it's just, I don't like it. Put up a 16 in 32 and a half minutes. That's a half a fantasy point per minute. I don't love being here. I think I'd rather be on this kind of an angle maybe. Have some, but maybe an undercut. I think we can get away with maybe leaving that value aside a little bit, just given how many comparably priced players in the fours we've got. There's a lot to work with. We don't need to get too overweight to Bub Carrington. Differentiated guys on FanDuel. The most differentiated one down here at the bottom, Dalton Connect. In 28 minutes at 4,500. He's coming up 24% of the time. He's just been a 0.75 per minute player. But again, just warm bodies from the Lakers are going to land in some lineups today. We do still have Reeves is technically just probable, as is AD. One of those guys would matter more. But if Reeves doesn't go, there would be a upstream effect for some of these other guys. Then Ben Mathurin, 5% mixer. Kobe White, 6% mixer. If we get no, what was it, Giddey? Yeah, Giddey is questionable, and Vooch and Patty Williams are all questionable. So any one of those guys being out would impact everybody a little bit. But then, more specifically, Giddey being out would impact the Whites and the Ios and so on of the world. So just keep an eye situationally on what happens with Chicago, the minutes and the projections as we go forward. That's about it at the guard spot. Let's move on. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, jump into our Discord. I'll drop a link to the Discord for anybody who doesn't have it. Site is rotoscouts.com. Everything is VA Princes in the chat. If D-Lo is chalk again, I will happily walk away. Everything at Roto Scouts, access to all of the sports that we're covering. And that's the 3 major sports that are going on right now, plus baseball when it's in season. And we'll find things to add as we grow. Under $1 a day, weekly, monthly, and quarterly plans. I was talking about it yesterday, and I'll say it one more time. I don't want to harangue you guys about it, but my goal here is to help you guys keep your bankroll. My goal is to help you guys grow your bankroll. My goal is not to have you guys spending crazy money. I think the industry is mispriced for the average player. It's correctly priced for the people who, enter thousands of dollars of lineups a day and, go 150 max across multiple tournaments and everything. Yeah, they can afford hundreds of dollars per sport or whatever. But for the average guy, the average person out there who's working with grocery prices being what they are and everything, a couple bucks a day go into DFS these days for a lot of people out there. That's why our prices are $1 a day, always less than $1 a day, I should say, for access to all of it. And it's projections right now. You get basketball projections for every main slate. You get hockey projections for every main slate every day. You get every football slate, showdowns, and the football and the main slate. Anytime they throw weird 2-gamers on a Thursday, a Monday, a Friday, random-ass Friday game that popped up, covering all of it. Under $1 a day. Check it out, rotoscouts.com. That is it. Pitch over. Let's dive into forwards. Theodore liked it. Yeah, the hero for the working man. You heard how I threw the groceries into that one, right? Me politicking. Differentiated guys on your FanDuel slate. Wemby, not coming up all that much. A lot of competition at that price tag. He's a monster performer. He could go out there and bend the slate a little bit, against the Jokic's, ADs, and so on of the world. He's similarly priced to those guys, but he's similarly productive to those guys as well. So that's interesting. We're a hard undercut to the field at 6%, but we did get him a little bit on FanDuel. He's not on the DraftKings slate, obviously. Pull that up real quick. I just want to see what that actual raw ownership percentage is. Because if it's where I think it might be, that might be a spot we could, talk at least about building a position that would be like a contrarian play. And obviously the math not necessarily on our side. And it's a little higher than I wanted it. Never mind. It's like 3x what we've got. If it was twice what we had here, I'd be talking about how you could go to 18 and maybe take a position versus the 12. Just given his ridiculous 161 per minute and the crazy ceiling that he's got on FanDuel that is competitive with Jokic. That would have been interesting, but since he's already triple what we've got here, that position doesn't really exist. You'd have to go into the probably like upper 20s to do it. So I really don't like it. I wanted to like it, but no Booker, no KD. Both guys just kind of, 111, 115 per minute, both underperforming their previous season's 1.23s. Either guy perfectly capable of breaking off a monster game. I've got him projected at full minutes, but against that bad Utah team that could potentially be a little bit even more shorthanded today, probably not, though. It does seem like those guys are going to play. You could run into not necessarily a direct, blowout short minutes day, but you might get, 34 instead of 37 out of Book. You might get 31 instead of 34 out of KD. And it just shaves their downside on already what is looking like a pretty downside day. 12% on Collins on the other side of that one, perfectly fine. That's level with the field. We already talked about CP, but he's right there again. That's because I'm not sorted. Let's see. We talked about Champagne. We talked about Shaden Sharp. Sohan, 28.6% again. All those missing bodies for San Antonio. It's another spot where just warm bodies And he's been one of their upside players, 1.12 per minute on both sites this season. Gives you a little bit of edge, but the field is there. That probably puts the field, 35-ish%? I don't think you need to get carried away with that one, given what else we've got on the board at the position. But he is sitting there. It is the last game of the night. Gives you a little bit of flexibility. If you wanted to kick it up to the field, you're not terrible there. But I think I'd rather be in our position here, maybe down to 25% against where the field's at. 5.09 value score, though. He is over the threshold. Beal falls into the same bucket as the other two. Technically, he's the guy we got from the Suns because the price is just dramatically different. 93-92 for KD and Booker versus 68 for Bradley Beal. Small forward and shooting guard eligible. Still putting up 0.93 per minute. Obviously, he's not the guy he once was. And he has these guys eating up a lot of it. But there's a little bit of value there. But again, it's another one where the field's there. If the field's at 15, I'm not going to press shares of Bradley Beal just to get him back to the field. So have a few. No need to go crazy for it. And if you end up with just one or two, you're probably not going to really hurt yourself. He's a 4.5 value score. 12% of Harrison Barnes, meh. 4% of Tumani Kamara, meh. A 0.68 and a 0.73 per minute FanDuel player. I feel like you could do better. They're both projected for upper 20s minutes. They're only 4,400. I get why they landed in some lineups in the Sims, but this is not the Sim telling us to go crazy and grab those guys. This is just spot filling across all the lineups. A little bit less so for Barnes, but both guys sub 5 value scores. Neither guy looks like a priority, even with the missing bodies in San Antonio. It's the monster upside games for Harrison Barnes are few and far between. Champagne, again, a ton of guys just missing for Washington. Should have a secure 30 minutes. He was this value just the other day and delivered 36.6 FanDuel points in 34 minutes. He's a 0.98 per minute player across the 20.9 minutes that he's played in 5 games this season. He was a 0.97 per minute player last year for whatever it's worth. 4,500 both forward spots on DraftKings. He looks like a massive piece of this slate. 82%. If things change around him in other games, that could come down a little bit. It's not like he's priced at the minimum. It's not like he's priced in the threes. I don't have necessarily somebody top of my head to thrust into that example. But you could see some things change that would lower this a little bit. But right now, he is looking like the value du jour on DraftKings. That means of the day for the non-French speakers out there. Not that I'm a French speaker. Ricky Lee, what's going on, man? Been on vacation for a while. How's your Soto jersey doing? Never bought one. There's no such thing as a Soto jersey. There's just a number 22. That's why the Yankees don't put names on the back of jerseys. Root for the laundry, not the player. That's my advice. Yeah, that one stung, Ricky. How was vacation, bud? Where'd you go? Well done. It's always a good fallback position when the Yankees lose players. It's not his jersey. Theodore prefers Wemby to AD on FanDuel. Went back to Korea for a bit. That's fun. They had a little kerfuffle in the government a couple of weeks ago over there. Handle it quickly, cleanly. Everything back to normal. Javier says, Soto is my best ever dynasty pick. Remember when everyone wanted Robles instead? Oof. I had Robles as a dynasty guy, but he wasn't my pick. He was somebody that I eventually acquired. I don't think anybody's got Soto as a dynasty player. Now you got me all over. All sidetracked here. Oh, wait, let me leave that up. We'll get back into basketball in just a second, but now I got to see. My buddy Justin in our Dynasty League has the best locked down Dynasty guys. He was ridiculous a few years ago as far as his Dynasty guy. Oh, he actually does have Soto. So as guys that he'll have at escalating prices and draft picks, but starting in the 30th round of our 30-round draft, which is no longer 30 rounds because everybody's got contracts, because we do contracts. He's got Fernando Tatis, who going into this year he's got for $46 against our $400 cap with a $30 buffer to the hard cap. So $46 20th round pick for Fernando Tatis, $50 20th round pick for Juan Soto, $50 20th round pick for Kyle Tucker, $20 30th rounder for Tristan Casas, $22 30th rounder for O'Neal Cruz, and he's also got Ellie, who I'm not seeing on here. Anyway, yeah, there you go. He's got Ellie in the 30th round for $1. So he won again this year. He's been ridiculous. But yeah, he's the guy who took Soto in a dynasty draft years ago. Good for him. Last man in, FanDuel. Single entry. Kobe White or Norm Powell. That's a good one. My instinct is to say Norm, but that could change, especially if Chicago loses a few guys. No. Idiot. Not you, me. We really didn't get much of either guy. That was what I knew they were somewhat similar there. Technically, we're closer to the field on Kobe White with a little bit more of them in our pocket. They are like dead even, though. I mean, that is it's a very good question. It could come down to where you need him. If he fits at small forward, then maybe it's Norm Powell. If he fits at point guard, maybe it's Kobe White. I assume you're just looking at a shooting guard spot, and that's irrelevant. I would default to the guy in that situation with the higher usage rate and the higher per minute output. I would also throw into the fire, though, that Norm Powell's been a little bit banged up, and Kobe White's in a spot where he could benefit from the absence of several teammates. So you might want to just pop Kobe White in from that. What time do these games start? That's an 8 o'clock, and the other one's a 9 o'clock. You can put Kobe White in that spot, try and ride the wave of upside for him, and then if by 8 o'clock you don't see it and he's just in and is who he is, you can shift that back to Norm Powell. Granted, you'll have to have that $100 in your pocket to do that, but you could do that. So I would maybe do it that way. I would probably roster this, make sure you've got the 100, because in a raw sense, I think I'd rather have Norm because he's the slightly better per minute performer and stands out for the different usage. But in the changing Bulls situation, if a couple of those guys don't play, then I'd rather have Kobe. So start with him, potentially pivot to Norm. And at worst, it's a tie. Good enough? Anthony Taylor says he needs to be the Yankees GM and manager. My buddy Justin. Pretty sure he's a Mets fan. Which worked out for him. I think he is. Pretty sure. He's a Jets fan, I know. Javier says, I finished second in the last 3 years and never won since I got married, and I got Tatis, Soto, and Acuna. Wow. Well, Acuna hurt you with the injury, but you got monster years out of him. But yeah, our whole league is like that because everybody's got different pieces and parts from various dynasties, and we've traded and so on and so forth. And it's all just tons of upside guys there, and then we do our minor league draft every year that I've talked about to keep adding those guys and multiple levels of free agency and contracts. It's nuts. One of these days I'll share the rules with you guys. I think I've done that in the past. Anyway, losing viewers as we talk baseball, not basketball. Let's continue on here. So we talked Justin Champagny, Naz Reid on FanDuel, not really coming up as relevant at all, but at 4,600, we always get that Naz pop, 1.02 per minute. Even in his average minutes, he's capable of spiking big games, and for that price, he's coming through in a fair share of our lineups as far as chasing ceiling goes. 36%, that's level with the field. Just a really good price to find a really good per minute performer, even in his average situation. Jaden McDaniels following him right up the ladder at small forward. 4,000, it's just a good price. Again, is who he is kind of a spot. 30 minutes from McDaniels here. He's a .70 DraftKings per minute player. On FanDuel, he's a lot less relevant at 16%. But it's a fair price. Not a good per minute guy. I'm happy to pivot around these guys, as I say a lot. But right now, the math is supporting having at least a little bit. If you want to shave it down, be 10-ish% on FanDuel, a little bit, this kind of an angle. I think that's okay. Same deal on DraftKings if you want to take that to 25 beyond, this kind of a green angle. I think that's okay. You've got a lot of movable parts at that position, even on the shorter DK slate. Bane we touched on during guards, but again, just 9% FanDuel, 26% DraftKings, level with the field. Jordan Miller at 3,600. 5+ value score on DraftKings. Technically, we're looking for 5.5, but that matters less when you're a $3,600 guy. Give me the other board here real quick. What do I have? Got him right on his season-long production. 0.84. Right, I've got him right in the neighborhood, technically like 0.82 and change. It's just standing out for more shares than I thought it was going to. Come on. Let's see. That one spiked because there was no Harden, no Coffee. 24. He played pretty consistent minutes over the last 3, but it's been with some missing bodies. And then was like 15 and change prior to that. I might be a little high on the minutes. I don't love how he's coming up. But they do still have no Terrence Mann, no Derek Jones, so, obviously no Kawhi. That may be... Let me cheat. Let's get a reference point here. Similar. It's not like the field's not there, right? We're below the field at that 18%. So I don't think that necessarily anything's wrong here. I wasn't necessarily expecting to see that much of them. But 3,600, as long as we're getting the 20-plus minutes, we should be okay. He played 32 in the last game, but again, missing bodies in the last 3 when he's seen a reasonable uptick in minutes lately. Keep an eye on it. If you see that projection drop, and you'll have the minutes as well, minutes and standard deviations are on the projections now, just keep an eye on it. You would want to get aggressively away from the field for every point that he drops. You can't lose 10 points for every point that he drops because you'd be, after 1.5 points, you'd be done. But something like that, you would want to get aggressively away from that one if those minutes drop. There's AD. So we were going to talk about that. It's just AD with no LeBron versus Wemby with obviously, more to do because of a lack of guys there. I just think the upside of AD with no LeBron probably outweighs the upside of Wemby. But technically, you're not wrong in a overall per minute performance sense. This year, 153 out of AD per minute on FanDuel versus 161 out of Wemby. And last year, Wemby blew him away. In his rookie year, Wemby, and I've shown this before, was comparable with only Giannis, Jokic, and AD didn't qualify for that. He was great, 1.51, basically what he's doing this year. But Wemby played at 171. He was a full 0.2 of a fantasy point better than AD last year. So in a lot of ways, you could argue that doesn't really even compare, and it is strongly in Wemby's favor. But the pendulum swings the other way, I think, with taking LeBron out of the equation. Ceilings are very competitive. AD is going to push a little bit beyond, I think. The per minute numbers, obviously, favor Wemby a little bit, as does the... No, the price is in AD's advantage. The projection is definitely in AD's advantage because I gave him more than the 153. On DraftKings, we got AD at 16% and below the field for 11,000 at the center spot. I'm curious how many of these are falling at pure center versus how many are falling at power forward. I'm also curious how many of these we got alongside Jokic. Can't be that many. I think those two guys are going to be one or the other one, despite having the ability to put them at different positions. So the Astros package for Kyle Tucker was Isaac Paredes, Hayden Wesneski, and Cam Smith. That's awful. Yikes. Isaac Paredes, only good when he can homer into the left field corner. All right. Get back on track here. So I was looking up. So I don't have him at his 153 for AD, but I kept him shy of even 1.6, even in the advanced situation. So he's at projection lighter than Wemby. We've got him for 5 more minutes. That's creating a bit of a gap. So if you don't think he's going to play the additional minutes, and you think you're getting like 32 out of him like you played the other day, put up a 64-7, that could get a lot more competitive and close. So yeah, it's at worst, Wemby is absolutely probably the prime example of a guy with the ridiculous per minute production. You can always have more. If you can find a way to buy it, you can always take more Wemby. If you want to balance it out against AD, it's reasonable. I just went through the full argument there, but right now numbers are strongly favoring AD. A lot less so on DraftKings in terms of our overall exposure. Again, we're getting 16% over there for the 11,000, just bouncing off price and position differently. Miles Bridges, if he plays, I only give him moderate minutes, 2.6% exposed on FanDuel, mix and match piece at best, 6,000 on DraftKings, power forward only, 16%, still questionable. I don't love it. I could find other ways to spend, I think, these shares. So since we're already coming up below the field, I think I would probably lighten that up even more. But he is very cheap at 6,000 for his upside. He is a good player. Gordon, assuming he comes back, didn't really land on FanDuel for the 58. On DraftKings for the 55, we got more of them, but we're below the field on that one as well. It's a little bit more of a gentle undercut than like our Norm Powell shares. Gordon's a good player. He's an underrated guy that the public doesn't love getting to for some reason, and I like Aaron Gordon. He is a strong stat stuffer. This year, 9.9% rebounding, 15.2% assist rate, 9.9% rebounding. I'm further over than on that side. I continued it. Those are the two columns that I reclaimed before. I didn't realize that was still scrolled out over there. Now I'm back. 65.2% true shooting, 15.2% assist, 9.9% rebounding. He's been better in these two categories in years past. Gives you a lot of spread of the ability to both create and collect fantasy points. I never mind getting shares of Aaron Gordon, but it does look like the field will be there on DraftKings, and I think that's where you'd want him. If I came away with 10% on FanDuel and like level with the field, I think that's okay, but it's not really like a go-get-it kind of a position. MPJ, more so, 7,000 at both forward spots. 17% exposed in our top 150, basically level with the field on FanDuel. On DraftKings, a little bit less than the field at 13%, but definitely a workable moving part from the upper mid-range. Not exactly an extreme discount, but he's a decent per-minute performer, just under 1 per minute on DraftKings, 0.96 on FanDuel. Basically jibes with usage and production from years past, capable of spiking big games from time to time. If there's no Jamal Murray for Denver, there will be just more for everybody to do. It's not a direct positional correlation. That also potentially could feed the facilitation for Aaron Gordon, in my opinion. So it's a spot to watch for, sneaky potential improvement for other guys that are not like directly filling in like Russ would be in that guard spot. We skipped over Russ at guard. I guess he didn't come up. Nah, D'Lo. We talked D'Lo. Yeah, no shares of Russ on either site right now. 6,100, 6,300. Came up flat. 4.3 value score on FanDuel, 4.29 on DraftKings. That changes in a big, big way if Murray doesn't play. So definitely keep that in mind. Keep that one to watch. You'll see it come through the projections, assuming we get it ahead of lock. You'll see it after lock for swaps if we get it after lock. Looking for some differentiators on FanDuel. Let's see. We've already talked Brandon Miller. Oh, we skipped over Triple J, 12% level with the field FanDuel, 12% below the field slightly on DraftKings. Just, again, another guy who very, very good player with ceiling, but for the price, kind of falls short of my minutes threshold for where I want to spend that money. 29 minutes today, they've been just spreading 20 minutes. It's them and Golden State that are the most annoying rotations as far as I'd like to play some of those players, but I don't know that they're going to be out there enough for this price. If he drops commensurate with the minutes, I think it becomes more interesting, but not tonight. Perfectly fine to have, some shares of him and easily could go out there. He's projected at 38, so a 50-point game is not a crazy outlier. A 45-point game is one standard deviation. So perfectly fine to have some Triple J. Again, I try and emphasize this because I don't want these numbers to be misleading or the arrows or whatever to be misleading on these shows. He is still a very good player, a very good per-minute performer. It's just a little light here against that price. Knocks down his value a little bit, but could deliver, and I'm happy to have the 12% of him. Rui surprisingly didn't come up. The Lakers came up weirder than I thought they were going to. 12% of them below the field on DraftKings, 5.04 value score, not a bad value. But I guess just the way that everything's bouncing off of each other when you throw it all into the dryer, really not coming up as much as I thought he would, given the upside for value that the Lakers should be showing. And that was true about Reeves, Connect, D'Lo, all of those guys. AD is the one who benefited the most in our sim. Could we give Rui a little bit more meat on the bone here? Maybe. What do I have him? I guess I could. I know I looked. Come on. Cooperate with me, Wowie. Can I get it quickly? I know we're excuse me. I know we're running a little bit long here, but a lot of things bouncing around to address. While Wowie's loading, I'll reload the news. Literally nothing since we started the show, outside of the Duop Reef going to questionable and Thomas Bryant being traded to the Pacers, which we already discussed. Oh, wait, this is also like... would... All right, this should be close enough. Now it should be close enough. That is a... If you really wanted to, you could give Rui another 2 points here. Just like raw fantasy points, just change the projection. That would reflect a little bit more accurately just directly on the rate that he's been at in the most comparable version of this situation. I will say, though, throwing him against the T-Wolves in a game with a... What was the total here? 213.5 point total when we've got multiple games above 230 and everything else is above 225. This is the only game in the two teens, and it's in the lower end of the two teens. Maybe that's what's impacting the Lakers more than anything else, is just the bad game environment against a good defensive squad. I don't know that I'm going to give those points to Rui. I might give one of them to him just to give him a slight uptick, make it a little bit more representative, but I don't think it's a priority. 12%, you could go to 15. I wouldn't go to 20 on DraftKings unless something changes. No Reeves would benefit everybody, as I said before, but we've already got Rui at 35 minutes. You know, I could give him that, probably would lead me to give him the additional 2 points. And you would get more of them. But I don't know that he becomes like a top of the board level, kind of priority. Maybe he climbs into like 20% and ends up like this. I could see that. Bagley looking like a mix and match piece at center for just 4,000 on the DraftKings slate. That is a good per minute player. I've only got him at 20 minutes though, so I wouldn't run completely wild with it. We're a little bit below the field at 11%. If you're 7-8%, you're fine. If you're 15%, you're probably carried away a little bit, but you're probably also okay. But I'd look to shift some of those shares. He's just very cheap for the per minute rate. 117 on DraftKings is good. Mobley might not go. If he does play, 14% FanDuel, 10% DraftKings. Is who he is, kind of a spot against the front court. He should be able to do whatever he wants against. Brandon Miller going nuts on FanDuel. Less so on DraftKings for the price, but definitely still appealing. Cam Johnson, 22%. Hard undercut to the field on FanDuel, but still 22% of Cam Johnson in our lives over there. I was not expecting that. 6,800, both forward spots. Good enough performer, especially when they're missing pieces. He goes out there. If he's a guy who, if he knocks down a couple threes, can instantly spike a little bit of additional score. There's a cop going around outside. The sun's come down in New Jersey. The drones are out. 7% on DraftKings. I think I'd rather be here on Cam. That's probably like 7 versus like 15, 18, and this is like 22 versus like 35. I think I'd rather be here. Just feels better. But he's given us some upside games this year. Could be capable of one tonight. I wouldn't rule him out. Alexander Walker is a mix and match piece on both sites at best, but he's very cheap for 3,800. He's one of those guys that mixes into that wash if you're looking to get off of the cheaper plays at the top of the board. Not that that's what I'm advising, but I do like to point out the guys that I think would jump into those spots if that's your chosen position. Buzelis, only if guys don't play. You would see it. He's 3,600 on the DraftKings slate at both forward spots. He's already coming up 6% of the time, but that's at a sub-5 value score at 20 minutes. On FanDuel, we didn't get him at all for 4,200. I'd be curious what his impact would be here if he picks up a few additional minutes, a little bit of additional upside. He's been a 0.90, 0.89 player across sites this season. He's very, very cheap. There are guys at his position that are questionable today. Could see a little bit of a float if those guys don't play. Batum, mix and match, not even on FanDuel for 37. At 31 on DraftKings, we did get him 6% of the time. That's below the field, another movable part. That's a very, very cheap price, but he's a very bad per minute player. 0.61 per minute this year on sub 10% usage. This is not appealing. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that you really want to go nuts for that. If he lands in a few lineups, that's fine. If he lands in as much as like 5% of your lineups, it's fine. And the field's not crazy high on him there, right? If the field's at like 10, if you accidentally got 10% of them, you'll have plenty of time to pivot out of those shares for one thing. But I think you're not completely shot in the foot, but just one of my least favorite players to see land in the lineup given the low end performance potential. It's illustrated right here. 6.3 FanDuel points in 25.8 minutes. You know how difficult that is to do? To put up just 6 points in almost 26 minutes? Like if it was me out there, yeah, you'd expect negative a bunch. But Nick Batum is a real NBA player. Even that many minutes, we should be dealing with a little bit better. Jared Allen, mix and match piece right now, but like all the other Cavs, would gain ground if Mobley doesn't play. Specific for him, there would be upside. So I would expect to see a little bit more of him and probably would maintain like this kind of posture against the field on both sides. And we would just have more in the raw sense. Like we'd have 12 on FanDuel, 15 on DraftKings, and the field would be in the 20s, something like that. But I would expect we would stay a little bit behind the field, just given everything that we want to get to that we've already talked about. Finney Smith is also crashing the FanDuel party. Jeez. Some uncomfortable nets coming through that I was not necessarily expecting on FanDuel. Just 4,400, 30 minutes, both forward spots. I get why he landed a little bit, but that is another low-end per-minute performer overall. 0.74 per minute, low usage guy. 0.69 per minute last year, so technically he's been better on the slight uptick in usage this year with just, a rotation of guys going in and out of the lineup for the Nets and him being not completely stable. He's only played 16 games, but one of the more stable guys. 30 and change minutes the other day. He gave you a downside, 18.3 points. More than capable of doing that to any given slate, but a 5.7 value score right now. And then again, that game, 229 point total. They're 10-point underdogs. Does that feed the competitive juices and get him involved? Probably not. It is a game where they're picking up a big uptick in possessions, though. So it justifies floating guys above their rate. It does look like he's come down somewhat, though. Let's see. Oh, that's DraftKings. I was like, that can't be right. Yeah, still holding on to like half this publicly. I might look at that one. I'm gonna put a little label on that one. I'm just not sure that he should be projected even with the additional possessions quite as high as the model wanted him. If I do that. Yeah, I think Finney Smith is going to level off with the field a little bit if you reran this on FanDuel. He was already not really relevant on the DraftKings slate for 48. It's just a matter of the FanDuel price. I would expect to be more in the 20% range on DFS here. That one's going to probably come down. Obi, mix and match player at best on both sites. Same deal with Dean Wade. These are the low-end options. Randall, Siakam, Ben Mathurin, Ben Simmons, Kelly Oubre. A couple few shares of each of those guys on FanDuel is not a problem, but none of those guys is overly appealing on the FanDuel slate. It looks like the field's getting a little bit of Julius Randle. He's down to 7,100, but he's been playing at a 1.05 per minute this year versus the 1.17 we got in half a season last year from him, and just kind of hasn't really spiked a lot of big upside performances. Did put up solid, 37 points, but that's right on the nose of a point per minute. That's not what we need from Julius Randle. That's why the pricing's going down. I get why there's popularity there, but I think I'd rather be here against the field on Randle. I think that's correct. No love here. 24% of Connect we talked about already. 3% of Patty Williams if he plays. Jalen Wilson, I mentioned before. I'm thinking of Jalen Smith. I knew there was a Jalen in my head. I just reacted to the wrong one. I think that's it at the bottom of the board. Let's jump to center, and we could talk about the other Jalen. Come on. This is the guy I wanted to bring up just then. If we get no Vooch is questionable. I do think that Jalen Smith goes to the moon as far as what his value looks like. It's a 1.17 per minute player last year, 1.20 per minute player. That's across just under 15 minutes a night. But it's a consistent rate. He is a consistently decent per minute guy, and he's very cheap. 4,100 even on FanDuel where you only get one center. I would expect to see him. Probably not to the point where he's blocking off all my access to Jokic, all my access. Well, you get AD at power forward, but you get my point. I don't think he goes to that bonanza level. But on DraftKings, I think you're going to get a lot of them if he comes up. That's one that you'll... Well, what time is that game? 8 o'clock. We'll probably know ahead of lock. It's 5:45 right now. Did not realize we'd gone that long already. Oh, here we go. Torrey Craig, questionable with an allergic reaction. Alex Sarr won't have a minutes limit on Friday. That's a good thing. Evan Mobley is a game time decision. Where do I have Sarr's minutes right now? I think that might lead to a couple additional minutes for Sarr. That could make Sarr a little bit more interesting. I don't think he's coming up right now. I had him upper 20s. If I kick him into the 30s, we might get a little bit more Sarr. He's right here. 4% and below the field for 5,400 on your DraftKings slate. He's power forward and center eligible over there. 6,100 on FanDuel is a very different price, power forward and center. I don't expect we would see that much of him on the FanDuel slate, even if I give him a little bit more here. On DraftKings, though, for every little bit that I give him, he's going to gain ground on the field. And it would probably be more of a normalization The field might adjust a little bit. But again, if I kick that into the low 30s, there would be a reasonable uptick. He's a good per minute guy, 0.99 DraftKings, 1.03 on FanDuel. Going to need size and length against Cleveland. I can see it. Starting at the top of the board, though. Nurk, reasonable piece. I've only got him at 24 minutes. Again, has been out for several games. Don't really know what it looks like. If we get like a no minutes limitation kind of announcement like we just got on SAR, that could change and he could become even more valuable. But I think this is reasonable to expect. It's also right on his season average. So I don't think you're seeing very much beyond this. But maybe there's a little additional upside tucked away in there. Or he just doesn't go. 5.89 value score. 30% owned on FanDuel, basically. Level with the field. Looking like a piece. Not totally comfortable with it. I don't love going to guys coming back from injury. Just a lot of variability, a lot of fragility there. Ayton, another spot where, again, just speaking of injured centers, they've got 4 guys listed as questionable to qualify at the position today. Here's 3 of them. Oops. So out of the 3 that are currently projected and questionable, and we added Duop Reith to this list, he's not projected right now. We're getting a little Ayton already. If these 2 guys don't play, we would probably get more Ayton because there would be an uptick of at least a couple of minutes. And then Reith presumably would be active, or, most ideally, I think, if Ayton doesn't play and you get these 2 guys, or more specifically, like, let's say Klingon plays at 4,000, that becomes somewhat appealing. But again, it's a situation where I don't know how much of this, even if the value does emerge, how much of that with other values present on the slate at other positions do I really want boxing me out from my Jokic shares, from whatever AD needs to fall at center? So I don't know how much we get invested into the Portland Bigs anyway. Monster. Wow. Especially with DraftKings giving you money back tonight on your $5 entry fees, by the way. That popped up on my phone before. 64% of Jokic on DraftKings is a nice spot to be in. 12.5, he's very expensive. He's still at a 5.3 value score. 1.83 per minute this season. It's been absolutely ridiculous. Not much going to stop him from doing whatever he wants out there. Outside of maybe coming out of the game in a blowout, I don't really see much getting in his way in this one. Love the upside for him. I honestly want more of them, I think, on FanDuel than what we got. We're 12% basically level with the field. If I can find a way to build a position on Jokic where I'm 20 plus and the field's only at 12, I think that's an advantage. He's a 5.16 value score. Again, we're looking for 5 on FanDuel, so he qualifies for our value threshold despite being a $12,800 player. Just ridiculously good per minute performance. Nas we talked about, Clark we talked about, AD we talked about, but again, get some AD in your life. AD without LeBron, definitely going to benefit. Not definitely. Not definitely. Should. Joval, mix and match play. 4% for $5,900 on FanDuel. 14%, little undercut to the field for $55 on the DraftKings slate. It's a better price, obviously. It's a tremendous per minute guy. If they choose to match size with Cleveland a little bit more, could he see an uptick in minutes to, the mid upper 20s? He could. So I could see a little bit of a wave of upside. I think, though, if you were to... It's not something I would project him for unless we got, specific information about it. But if you were to adjust his projection to reflect that kind of a situation, I think at best we would just be level with the field. So you wouldn't be necessarily building a Joval position if you did that. I think you'd just be taking him up to the field's 25 or whatever percent and just kind of leveling off, where as always, I'd rather have a position on those kind of plays. Triple J, we've talked about 12%, and again, a guy with tons of upside on any given slate, but just limitations of minutes for those Memphis dudes. Claxton, another net coming up. Solid value score on FanDuel, 6,100, a 5.47 value score. We got him 12.6% of the time. That's technically behind the curve for Nurk, because Nurk is only 48, which is just crazy low. That's our next best value guy, technically. If Nurk comes off the board, or just gets, reduced, I think that goes directly to Claxton, given how that falls. Not that they're the same price, but given what that points per dollar number looks like. Or maybe they just go up to Jokic and we get value elsewhere. But that's an interesting one given that value mark. We are below the field at our 12.6. You could level it off with the field and take the value score. It's not when you get that kind of a critical value number, it's not a bad decision to make if you just say, all right, that's where I'll take that mid-range guy. And then I'll have a different guy at like small forward where I would have had Ben Mathurin or whatever. But with one center only available, I just am so tempted by that Sweet Siren song. Less so for Joe Val. I can put these guys at power forward if I want any of them, and it's most specifically AD. Center only Joel Embiid did not come up on FanDuel. Out of the three big centers, easily the bottom of the board. Sub 5 value score, sub 4.5 value score for 10-6. He's the cheapest of those guys. Could he go out there and outperform AD, Jokic, and whoever else, Wemby? Absolutely. Is it likely? I'd say it's a lot less likely. Did put up a 51-4 in 32.9 minutes last time out. 1.82 per minute last year. Is one of the true monster ceiling guys in the league, and technically you're getting him cheap. You're getting him even cheaper on DraftKings. He's $9,500 on DraftKings. We're a pretty firm undercut to the field where we're at. We are technically still, even at that low price, sub 5 value. We're obviously not at 1.8 and change, but we're very much not at 1.25 either. And he's really not coming up. If you want to give him credit for last year, if you want to give him credit for deciding to be Joel Embiid for a night, then that is an absurdly low price to find him at. So very appealing just in the raw who he is sense on DraftKings. But the performance has been a little bit light so far in his 5 games. Zubac, 16%. There's another spot with some shares on it at the center spot on FanDuel. I never mind getting to some Zubac. He's a decent per minute guy. 1.10. I just kind of like him a little better when it's at the end of the night and it's like a movable spot where maybe there's a cheaper or a more expensive center that I can alternate back and forth. In this situation, I think it's more an is who he is spot. And again, a 5.37 value score is pretty tremendous for the 72. Happy to take the 16% on FanDuel. On DraftKings at 74, we got a little bit lighter than the field, 8%. If you got him 10, 12, that's also fine. If you got him 5, that's fine too. He's very much a moving part. Not a priority. But I could see the upside, but I can also see staring me in the face a guy at a reasonable salary where I could say, all right, I'm going to take some of those shares and make sure that I'm getting some of these guys that are coming up a little bit stronger. So it might not be my favorite night for Zubac. Jared Allen we talked about. Rudy Gobert, never my favorite guy to get to. He did land with 8%. He's only 6,800 on FanDuel. At a point, his collection of fantasy points does outweigh the low prices when his prices go down. You get a lot of low-end performances out of Gobert. He's been a 0.92 per minute player on FanDuel this year, 0.90 on DraftKings where stocks count less. Just not a guy to go out of your way for on any given slate. The days where he finds a few buckets along the way to go with his blocks and rebounds and so on and so forth, those become slight upside days. But even that, I mean, even if you crest it up to like from this to last year's level, meh. Talked about most of these guys. Couple shares of Miles Turner, couple shares of Nick Richards. It's pretty hard undercut to the field on Nick Richards on FanDuel. We got none of them on DraftKings. 5,800 on both sites. It's kind of a mix and match play at best. 115 per minute, 118 per minute is not a bad rate for the price. Any justification to give him more minutes than I did? I think somebody asked about him. That's why I'm pausing to give it a glance here. Did play 33 games ago. They've got Daquan Jeffries back in the fold as another guy with reasonable size. Diabate was out for a couple of those games. Richards himself was out for one of the games for rest. I think we're most likely dealing with like 25 minutes, given who's there. Unless something changes around it, I don't see the Nick Richards really shining through. But again, give him a couple more minutes for a very good per minute performer at a fair price. He could land in, this kind of territory maybe. Whoops. Outside of that, nothing really standing out. No real differentiators down at the bottom of the board on FanDuel. Obviously, no real shares here. We do have, who is this? Mo Bamba popping his head above water. That's a weird little outlier. 16 minutes from Mo. Still capable of giving you good per minute performances, but wasn't really expecting that one. Played 17, 3 games back for the team, 2 games back for him because he missed their most recent one. Played just 6 in the game after that, 13 and 14 the 2 games prior to that. I don't think you need to get all that desperate. This is just happenstance. The field does look like they're there a little bit. That's probably like 5% public ownership because he is, again, the dead min. 1.08 per minute. Going to presumably be throwing some size out there in this matchup. Maybe he crests up to 18 minutes. It would be weird, but at the dead min, I wouldn't begrudge any shares. He is technically a 5.6 value score. I would much rather get to Jalen Smith in the changing situation if Vooch doesn't play. See if you guys are yelling at me. Jalen Smith double if Vooch is out, says Javier. That's a good call. Trey, just stay in Manhattan. Or if you're not staying in Manhattan, maybe stay across the river in Jersey City, like right across the George Washington Bridge. And you could Uber there for a few bucks. Around the stadium, there's really not anything. So there's a lot on the Jersey side that would be very, very easy. Look in like Fort Lee or like Edgewater. And those would be right by the George Washington Bridge. You shoot across the bridge, you continue going as if you're going onto the Cross Bronx, which means just go straight. And it's just a few exits down. Very easy to get to. So I think that wraps it, guys. Been rolling for an hour 40. Didn't even realize. Kind of flew by. I know we're bouncing around all over the place, but there's a lot of moving parts on this slate. Let's see if we got any new news to wrap things up. I'm going to spare you the lineup look today because I am pretty confident everything's going to change pretty dramatically in the next little bit. So coming up right on 6 o'clock on the nose, let me punch out of here. Take the full hour to get updates and be on top of everything here. Trey was looking in Fort Lee. Yeah, that's exactly where you want to be. And the reason I said that over like Manhattan is there's probably a $250 swing in your per night costs in the hotel. Not that Fort Lee is going to be crazy cheap, but it should be quite a bit cheaper than Manhattan. It's a reasonable little like walking town. There's some stuff there. Not a big town, but you wouldn't be horribly bored for if you have to spend like an evening there on your trip. A lot cheaper. Yeah, good. Yeah, and if you come further down, like let's say, if you were to land in like Hoboken, Jersey City area, like near where I'm at, it would be more expensive than Fort Lee. The access would be a little bit longer, but you could easily go via public transportation then. You take the PATH train across the river from Hoboken or Jersey City, and then you just jump on the D train directly to the stadium. It's a very easy process. That's how I get there. So that's also an option for you. And that gives you access to like party towns, bars a little bit more than Fort Lee would. Yeah, sure thing, bud. Ping me in the Discord if you need more. But let me get out of here. Let me wrap the show up. Thank you guys so much. All the likes, the subscriptions. Make sure you hit the bell down there. Subscribe to the channel. And then if you want to mute the notification, mute it. Helps us quite a bit. We're trying to get to 1,000. Let's do that. Rotoscouts.com. Everything's under $1 a day for access to all of it. acemind.io for optimization and sim needs. Promo code Rotoscouts gets you 20% off your first month over there. Football projections and content getting updated overnight tonight and going into tomorrow. One last reminder, guys. Tomorrow evening, I will not be here to be on top of injury and absence. I will give you everything for the 2 games possible beforehand so that you can be enabled to succeed with the projections. Projections will be up, But as far as breaking news at like 7 p.m., I'm going to be sitting in my niece's Nutcracker performance, so I won't be on top of it tomorrow. Apologies for that. You're going to be well armed to deal with it, and it's a crappy 2-game slate anyway. Good luck out there tonight, gang. Somebody go win something. Share it when you do, and we will see you for a show probably next time on Monday. Later.